To officially start proceedings this morning, I would like to introduce Mr. Jack Buckskin and invite him to share the welcome to country. Jack Buckskin is a proud Kaurna and Narungga man who has dedicated his life to learning and passing on his knowledge and language of the Adelaide Plains to future generations of Kaurna people. Jack currently works with the Taondi Aboriginal College in Port Adelaide as an Aboriginal cultural service mentor and has been a strong icon in the revitalisation process of the Kaurna language through managing and performing song and dance with Kuma Karu Cultural Services and through teaching the Kaurna language. Thank you for being here, Jack.
Firstly, I'll introduce myself. Everybody calls me Jack. Ganya Pundundu Ipinakun, which is my name, but everyone calls me Jack because it's easier. It's a little weird when you're standing there while they're doing a bio. I didn't realise I'd have to stand there, so thanks for that. And it's a little bit outdated as well. I haven't been at Taondi for about 6 years, but it's cool. I was at Adelaide Uni before that, so 2 years I lasted there, and then I was out of this place. So it's a great place to come for a while, but although I have to say I lasted longer than when I was at Uni SA. I lasted 6 months there, so yeah. Next time I'm off to Flinders. Thanks for allowing me to be able to welcome you on the country. It is an honour to be here to one, pay respects to our spiritual ancestors, as we got people that come from all over the place. Obviously here for a special occasion. Julie, it's been a while since I saw you last. 2011 it was, I remember, because it was Australia Day for the Young Australian of the Year. I was the guy standing right next to Jessica Watson when she won, so that's my... When you look back at it, I'm the guy on that side. Yeah. Nobody knows that guy's name, but now you do. Look, welcome to Kaurna country. Tarndaganya, the dreaming place of the big red kangaroo. It's an honour to pay respect to our ancestors and see some of our protocols embedded into mainstream society. Whether it's important to some people or not, it's very important to Aboriginal people, and I pay respects to other Aboriginal people that are here with us this afternoon. Maruchanganamini, Yalakamani, Burning Arlukuyatana, Kumari Yachamini, Yalakamani, Burning Arlukuyatana, Kumana, Nina, Kurananku, Kadalananku, Mani, Burning Garniyatana. Welcome if you've come from afar or you've. Anybody travel from far to come here today? Yeah, she's born and bred, man, so everyone else just like come down the road a little bit. So anyway, thanks for allowing me to welcome you on the country. Enjoy the rest of the time here, and I'll let what you really came here for happen. Achalia, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We appreciate you coming down the road, and we'll look out for that photo for sure. We really appreciate your generous welcome. I'd like to acknowledge our distinguished guests here today, Her Excellency the Honourable Francis Adamson AC, Governor of South Australia, and Mr Rod Bunton. The Honourable Professor Julia Gillard AC, 27th Prime Minister of Australia, visiting honorary professor here at the University of Adelaide, and of course the reason that we all come together today. Mr Stephen Patterson MP, Shadow Minister for Defence and Space Industries, the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Dr Jane Lomax-Smith AM, Senator Marielle Smith, Senator for South Australia, the Honourable Catherine Branson ACSC, Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, Professor Peter Hoy AC, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Adelaide, Professor David Lloyd, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of South Australia, Professor John Williams AM, Provost of the University of Adelaide, members of the University of Adelaide's Council and Senior Executive, Mr Simon Frood, Director General, National Archives of Australia, and of course, colleagues, students, alumni, friends, members of the community, welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us today in Bonython Hall. Before I ask the Vice-Chancellor to personally welcome you all to this campus, some points of housekeeping. Firstly, the bathrooms are located in the foyer near the front entrance, and accessible bathrooms are available near the eastern doors. Our staff will direct you should you need any assistance. And in the unlikely event that we need to evacuate the building, please don't look to me because I will be absolutely useless to you all. please follow the directions of our staff, who will ensure that you're able to exit the building safely. I would now like to invite our Vice-Chancellor and President, Professor Peter Hoy, AC, to officially welcome you.
Thank you very much, Jess, and it's wonderful to see such a full Bonython Hall. And they're not always this full, but I know why you're here today, and it's not to listen to me, so I'll try to be quick. First of all, I acknowledge Jack Buckskin for welcoming you to country. I acknowledge all the dignitaries who Jess already have mentioned, and of course, Julia Gillard, who was the 27th Prime Minister of Australia and the first, and so far, only woman to serve in that role. It's always a privilege to welcome Julia Gillard back to campus. We admire her achievements and the measurable positive difference she has made to and continue to make to people's lives here and, very importantly, globally. Just today, I was pleased to sign an agreement with the National Archives of Australia, a first step to establishing a Prime Ministerial Library in honour of Julia's achievements right here on our North Terrace campus. And I'm sure you would want to not only go and see it yourself when it eventually opens, but also to bring family and friends from South Australia and interstate, and perhaps even from overseas, to see that wonderful attribute of the university that we're so privileged to get, the Julia Gillard Prime Ministerial Library. As part of our 150th celebrations, the University of Adelaide recently had the opportunity to be the naming sponsor of an excellent piece of theatre, we think, I don't know what Julia thinks, celebrating Professor Gillard's career. That play was named Julia, and it explored the significance of a speech on the subject of misogyny, which had global resonance, as has many of the other things that Julia has done and continues to do. There have been many such high points in her career, which has been and continues to be focused on the most important issues facing our society. That passion to be at the forefront of public discourse has, of course, informed the content of today's event. Artificial intelligence has launched into the public consciousness in recent years, courtesy of such now readily available technological advances, and many of you would know for one instance of that called ChatGPT. Its reach is already significant, but we are at the very early stages of where this evolution will lead at an ever-accelerating pace. The University of Adelaide is playing, as it has for many years, a leading role in this field. Our Australian Institute for Machine Learning is at the forefront of global AI research. This morning, Professor Gillard will facilitate an informed conversation with some of our leaders on the rise of artificial intelligence in Australia across areas including politics, education, health and defence. Julia will be joined on stage by three of our distinguished academics from the Australian Institute of Machine Learning, the School of Psychology and the School of Law for a truly cross-disciplinary discussion on the far-reaching impact of AI across our society. This topic, as always with Julia, is timely and important and worthy of exploration by a figure of such importance as our former Prime Minister. It is now my great pleasure to welcome the Honourable Professor Julia Gillard AC to the stage to lead this discussion. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, huge thanks to Peter for that very kind introduction and for everything he does at this great university. Thanks to Jack for the welcome to country and for the humour embedded in it. And I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge Her Excellency, the Honourable Francis Adamson AC, our Governor, and a friend of mine from a long time back, and Mr Rod Bunton. I'd like to acknowledge our Chancellor, Catherine Branson, great that you're here, the Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of South Australia. I did ask what is the collective noun for Vice-Chancellors. We're still in search. I'm going with a pride, unless there's a better suggestion. I'd like to acknowledge my great friend, Senator Mariel Smith, a Senator for South Australia, and the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Dr Jane Lomax Smith. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here at the University of Adelaide for this year's public lecture, and you'll see what I've done this time. I say less and I get other people to say more. But it's a particularly special day for me, as this morning I did have the privilege, as Peter acknowledged, of witnessing the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between the University and the National Archives of Australia to establish the Julia Gillard Prime Ministerial Library here. And huge thanks to everybody who's worked so long and hard on this, and to Simon from the National Archives. I want to really help and lean in as we turn this vision into a reality, and I am truly honoured. It feels very natural to me that the library will be based here, where I started my higher education and found my voice as a political and policy activist. In the years to come, I'm really looking forward to seeing the library take shape as a living space for students to come and study. We have a lot of exciting plans for different programs and exhibitions, which I can't say too much about just yet, but we'll be sharing more in due course. And it's also given me the much needed impetus I need to clear out my shed at home. Maybe I'm going to find some things that make the cut. I'm also honoured to be here for this year's public lecture to explore a topic that has moved to centre stage in recent years: artificial intelligence. It's another technology revolution, and frankly, I feel like I've lived through so many already. It makes me smile to think back to the mix of technologies in use when I first started my professional career as a lawyer. Mr Jones, the elder statesman of the firm, dictated letters to his secretary, who took shorthand. Other partners talked into their dictaphones and their words were sent to a pool of word processing staff. And me, well, I was lucky enough to be one of the first to work directly on a computer. By the time I'd moved into politics, computers were everywhere. My predecessor in the seat of Lawler, the famous quizmaster Barry Jones, had been laughed at for predicting that there would one day be more computers than cars in our country. Of course, he was right. Back then, for those of us concerned about equity, the big debate was how to bridge the digital divide. How could we make sure that schools and communities were included in this revolution, that no one was left behind? Promising computers to schools, subsidising families purchasing laptops for children, and rolling out the national broadband network were all key policies for the Rudd government and the one I led. I'm really conscious how dated much of that sounds now. But I do believe some of the same challenges remain. Specifically, how do we shape artificial intelligence in a way that's safe and equitable for everyone? AI will be one of the biggest disruptors of the modern world. Whether you're aware of it or not, it's already part of our daily lives and is changing the way we live, work, learn, get information and interact. It's developing at such a speed that it makes the future difficult to predict, causing, understandably, both excitement and concern. Like with all new technology, there are risks and rewards across health, education, defence, politics, and many other areas. The opportunities are immense, but so are the threats. And today I want to explore both. To help us do so, I want to lay out 4 categories of risk. First, safety and automation. AI is increasingly embedded in the machines we use and the infrastructure that enables our life. Think of everything from the safety systems in your car, like the warning you are getting out of your lane, to the control of the movement at ports of containers on and off ships. As autonomous systems become more commonplace across many workplaces and industries, so does the complex push and pull between human and machine get everywhere. Can these systems, the AI systems, be trusted to operate safely and reliably? Can they be hacked by malign actors? Understandably, people look at AI and the new efficiencies it brings, but ask themselves the question, what if it all went haywire? The second risk is around jobs. The International Monetary Fund predicts AI will affect up to 60% of jobs in advanced economies like ours. Kristalina Georgieva, the IMF Managing Director, then breaks this 60% down into two categories, saying, and I quote, roughly half the exposed jobs may benefit from AI integration, enhancing productivity. For the other half, AI applications may execute key tasks currently performed by humans, which would lower labour demand, leading to lower wages and reduced hiring. In the most extreme cases, some of these jobs may disappear. And the pattern of what will be replaced is counterintuitive. Already in repetitive manual work, think factory production lines, human beings have been replaced by machines. AI has the potential to replace different kinds of labour, namely routine and non-routine knowledge work. Think of an AI lawyer with a better ability than a human to put together an analysis of the prospects of success of a case based on legal precedents, or an AI doctor better able to read imaging and make a diagnosis. Non-repetitive manual human work, think of things like hairdressing or care for the elderly, is not currently easy to replace with machines. But that shouldn't lead you to conclude that the jobs of people who are not in knowledge worker categories are all safe. Driverless cars could replace all those who currently drive people or goods. Of course, on the job front, it isn't all downside. Digital innovation, including AI, is forecast to contribute $315 billion to the Australian economy by 2030. But the benefits and the burdens will be inequitably spread. Thirdly, what does AI mean for how we get information and distribute power? Already, in some parts of the world, we have seen examples of AI's malicious use to undermine democratic processes through misinformation, disinformation, and deep fakes. And there is understandable concern about unprecedented levels of power and wealth being put in the hands of too few at the expense of the many. Witness the role of Elon Musk in the US election. He controls the algorithms at X, formerly Twitter. He is unlocking his personal wealth to support Donald Trump's campaign. And he has been promised significant control over how the public service and its agencies work through heading an efficiency commission which will audit and recommend drastic changes. In an increasingly complex and divided world, we must work out how to best leverage the potential of AI to the benefit and prosperity of all of humanity, not empower and enrich a small number of individuals. We currently have no comprehensive plan on how to manage all this. As I stand here today, there is no AI-specific legislation in Australia. Its usage is regulated through existing laws, such as the Privacy Act. Fortunately, more controls are being considered. Then last, but by no means least, fears over the rapid pace of untamed AI progress can engender terrifying visions. As long ago as the start of the Terminator franchise with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Hollywood has been giving us images of a world taken over by AI, in that case Skynet, and the attempts of humans to fight back against these AI overlords. But before you start making plans to go home today and to build an AI-proof bunker, take up doomsday prepping as a hobby, I can reassure you that at this stage, these kinds of scary plot lines really remain the stuff of Hollywood and other scriptwriters. However, some of the real-life threats do give rise to the question, what guardrails and protections are required? Circling back to my early days in law and politics, how do we reap the maximum economic and societal benefits of this technology in an equitable, ethical and democratic way, where no one is left behind? Here at the University of Adelaide, we are better placed than many other institutions to help us answer some of these important questions because of the nation-leading Australian Institute for Machine Learning. Long before AI or machine learning were even on the radar for many of us, work was happening right here. It includes collaborations between university thinkers and world-leading companies to develop high-tech products and solutions across every industry, and conducting research to solve some of the biggest challenges across a range of sectors that impact all of us, such as health, construction, transport, sustainability, agriculture and defence. Today, I'm thrilled to share this stage for a panel discussion with 3 leaders in this space who are here to help us make sense of it all. I will invite them one by one to join me on stage now. First, Professor Simon Lucy is the Director of the Australian Institute for Machine Learning and a Professor in the School of Computer Science right here at this university. Prior to this, he was an Associate Research Professor at Carnegie Mellon University's Robotics Institute in Pittsburgh, where he spent over 10 years as an academic. Secondly, Professor Carolyn Semler leads the Applied Cognition and Experimental Psychology Research Group, which focuses on the application of theories and models of cognition, judgment and decision-making to legal and medical contexts. And finally, Dr. Sam, he tells me only his mother calls him Samuel when he's in trouble, Dr. Sam White is a senior lecturer at the Adelaide Law School following his appointment as the inaugural Cybersecurity Postdoctoral Research Fellow. He currently holds positions as a visiting fellow at the Australian Defence Force Academy and as an adjunct associate professor at the University of New England. Will you welcome them with me, please? Well, thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation. I'm going to start with an open question to each of you. What are you most excited about and what are you most scared about when it comes to AI?
Great question, and I'm excited to see the big audience here today, although I think that's a normal thing for you, Julia, but a wonderful thing to see the interest that we're having here in AI. I think the thing I'm most excited by is that, it's something I think Peter just mentioned when he was introducing everyone, we're at the beginning. I think a lot of people are really thinking that AI is here, it's a solved commodity thing, it's all over, let's wait for it to be built and just sort of imported into Australia. But we're really at the inflection point for AI. People are realising what's possible, what could be done, but I kind of joke that we're going to think back at ChatGPT like the Rubik's Cube from the 1980s. We're going to be thinking that sort of like it was sort of this old archaic thing. It's really going to permeate every aspect of our lives. And so that's something I'm excited by. The thing I'm worried a little bit about is the anthropomorphizing of AI. A lot of people, we really struggle to even define what intelligence is. And so we are very human-centric when it comes to intelligence. And so we tend to project what intelligence means onto machines. And when that happens, bad decisions are made because it's a very different type of intelligence. I'll stop there, but they're the 2 things I'm sort of excited and a little bit worried about.
I'm moderately concerned from that answer that I'm still challenged by Rubik's Cube, but I'll leave that, I'll leave that where it is. Carolyn.
So I guess my excitement and hope comes from understanding how these incredible artificial intelligence systems can help us to learn more about ourselves. So I'm a cognitive scientist and my main focus is looking at how humans respond when they interact with machines. And so my hope is that we can recognise the power of this technology as a way of transforming human behaviour. And if we can transform human behaviour, we can actually help to solve some really difficult problems that we're facing right at the moment. Things like climate change, things like the equitable delivery of health, really fundamental problems that hold out real challenges but could be solved, or at least could be well and truly moved along the dial towards some really good outcomes for humanity. On the fear side, I guess the fear for me really sits within the notion of making inequality and inequity worse. So I guess that's sort of tied up with the way that we see artificial intelligence as a public good. So is it possible for us to design these systems in a way that we don't limit access to them? That in fact they're used for as a way of improving people's lives in a really distinctive and fundamental way. So those are the two things that I think of. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam, please.
Perhaps unlike the professors on my level, being quite junior, I'm really interested in how we can use it for efficiency. I'm quite a lazy person, so I think using AI it's a fantastic tool. And we're talking about Rubik's cubes. I think my father's 84 and he still struggles with Google. And I think that we're at this point where it's just a new tool and it's making everything so much more efficient, which is fantastic. On the other side, as a lawyer, I'm kind of obsessed with accountability. And I think that we haven't really figured out yet, how do we go about keeping this accountable? Is it a tool? Are people responsible? This idea of autonomous systems, I don't think we've worked out, is this truly a thing yet? Who is responsible? That's where I think my major fear lies, is that we'll create a system that no one is responsible.
And I'm going to stick with you, Sam, and look at the defence aspect. I think we should just clarify with the Vice-Chancellor here that you were joking about the lazy person thing.
Very much.
The future of your academic career. Sam, I mean, we obviously watch, this crowd watches the news, and the news is often full of disturbing images, international warfare in our world, and I'm going to focus in this question on the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, where it's been well reported that there are drones that are carrying out autonomous strikes. So that is, drones that are weaponised and can project lethal force without the intercession of a human being actually pushing the button. Once they're set on mission, they do their thing, and their thing is death and destruction. So can you talk to us about how you see AI and national security and military consequences? What should we be thinking about there?
Yeah, I think there's always, at this stage, we still have a human in the loop, right? So a decision is made to deploy that drone. There is still a human making that decision. It is, I think, a logical development from where we were during the First World War with massive artillery barges. This is actually a lot more efficient, but it's terrifying because it's individualised. I think from a national security perspective, where we'll be looking is that from an international law concept of distinction, we're focusing on the people that are targetable. But that is very terrifying for those that are targetable. Like when I was in the military, horrible to think that you could be targeted in your own home, but that it's within the legal frameworks as they exist at the moment. I think AI and national security will kind of see us asking, are the current rules appropriate? Should people be protected more now that we have a deeper reach through technology into individuals' lives?
Right, that's something to think about there, absolutely. And Carolyn, I'm going to come back to you and particularly go into the healthcare area, which I know is so much within your area of expertise. I mean, we're all familiar at one level with the integration of machines and people in healthcare, diagnostic imaging, MRIs, PET scans, all the rest of it, and then human beings taking that information and helping us with our healthcare. But this is another frontier, isn't it? Can you explain to us what you think it's going to look like, and what's the interface between humans looking after us and machines looking after us?
So interestingly, machine learning has probably had a huge impact really in healthcare for a very long time. So you're right to think that, in fact, technological change is rapid within healthcare, and we look to technology for a whole bunch of different purposes within that setting. So I think in the future, what we will tend to see is more of a partnership between deep expertise and machine learning algorithms. We are actually seeing that already in radiology, which is an area of research that I work within. But in radiology, what we've seen is that the algorithms are actually being used to augment the decisions of the care team. And that augmentation takes on a lot of different forms. It's not like it's a black box either. There is some degree of explanation that goes on between the system and the human decision maker, and it's still the domain of expertise that's relied upon within healthcare. There have been some really negative implementations. So fundamentally, what I think will change and what I hope will change in the application of machine learning and artificial intelligence in healthcare is not the replacement of the clinician, not necessarily robot doctors. It will really be about augmentation of the care team, and also better understanding of what happens to the entire hospital when you plonk a new piece of technology into that hospital. Can you end up, for example, increasing the number of surgeries that occur, which has economic impacts then for that hospital and for the state government budget? All of those things need to be considered. So it's the socio-technical system that needs to be better understood. So I think the future is actually a greater array of fields and specialties within healthcare that will use artificial intelligence. There'll be more widening of scope of practice for particular types of areas of application, and there'll be a greater, I think, emphasis on how we close the implementation gap. So how do we actually de-risk the implementation process? Because we don't want to put an algorithm in and then find out later that all of a sudden it's increasing the chances of someone from a particular ethnic background being underdiagnosed, for example, or another group being overdiagnosed, which is terrible in a system where you've got very limited resources. So it's about how do we implement safely and efficiently to augment the care that's going on within our healthcare system.
Wrong algorithms is one way you could introduce an inequity, but can you talk to us about how AI may or may not buttress inequities in the health system? I mean, people who look at things online would see that there's an increasing focus around the world on wellness and longevity science, and so maybe I've got this wrong, but I can imagine a future where people with resources have got the most sophisticated wearable tech. We've all got bits of it now, but we've got the most sophisticated wearable tech. It's telling me in the morning, potassium levels need adjustment or whatever, so I'm getting minute by minute data about how to maximise my healthcare, wellness, longevity, but people in more disadvantaged circumstances are not getting the benefits of any of that. Is that vision of the future credible? And if it is, how do we think about the equity piece?
So it is credible. I think that's a reasonable concern because it's all about the data. So inequity comes in a couple of different ways within healthcare algorithms. One of the ways is via data sets that come from unrepresentative populations. So for example, if you train a machine learning algorithm on a data set that really doesn't cover everyone, what you're going to get is great performance, but only for the people in that training data set. So you miss out on these subgroups of people who may be really disadvantaged particularly, so the algorithm doesn't actually perform very well in that instance, which means their healthcare suffers as a function of application of that system. So that's one side of it, but then you're right, it's also where is the data coming from? So if, for example, being able to buy a smartwatch, which, they're not cheap. If that's the kind of the buy-in to be able to get that information to then feed the algorithm to produce those great potential changes in human behaviour, that means you're also shutting out a whole bunch of people who can't afford to have those kind of sensors. So I think there's a really important piece for Australia and for our government to think about in terms of how do we actually match the training data that's needed within for implementation and training of these systems to these different groups that we know already have inequalities in healthcare. So how can we actually get the right data into the training phase? Then also, in implementing that algorithm, how do we actually ensure that we don't get data drift? So the algorithm, as people change, as our population changes, as the population ages, we're going to get changes in the performance of the system as well. We can't always see that unless there's an auditing process that's built in. So these are all really important, fundamental parts of the implementation pipeline that we haven't really started to hone in on and think about carefully. So I'd really love to see us doing more to make sure that happens. Yeah.
I'm not going to take the population ageing bit personally, but I can feel it. Simon, coming to you, how much can Australia play a role in the development of AI? I mean, can we be at the forefront? I think if we'd polled people on the way in today and asked them, you know, where is AI being developed around the world, they would have pointed to Silicon Valley or maybe MIT in Boston, places like that. I mean, what role is there for us?
It's a great question, and I think it's a question that here in Australia we have to really think strategically about. We've always batted well above our weight, or punched well above our weight anyway, with respect to science. We have a strong record of that. But AI is in this really interesting point at the moment. There is sort of this thesis going on, especially in venture capital at the moment. It's called the scaling thesis. And the scaling thesis is essentially, we've sort of solved AI, but all we need is lots of data and lots of compute. And we're going to keep on getting it better and better and better. And so you're seeing investment decisions sort of reflecting this scaling thesis. So everyone's favourite tech mogul, Elon Musk, recently announced he's got this company, XAI, this brand new computer. It's called Colossus. They announced it last year.
Of course it is.
Oh yes, very sort of a humble name. Colossus. It's got 100,000 GPUs, like top GPUs. It takes 1 million gallons of water a day to cool. To cool it. And it cost $4 billion. Okay? That's one company. So
that's sort of spare change for
That's
Elon.
spare change, yeah. It's sort of found it in his back pocket. So how does Australia navigate that? So what we've always done well is we've looked at what's happened in science and identified sort of where can we tunnel down into specific areas of AI and be globally excellent. And that's one thing I think the University of Adelaide's been doing really well on. We have global excellence in areas such as computer vision, robotics, and we're trying to establish global excellence in areas like responsible AI and also foundational AI. And what's exciting about that, if we invest strategically in this way, we can disrupt this, because at the moment, it's only the biggest companies and the biggest entities that can actually play in AI at the moment. But if you can disrupt this and make AI more democratic, make AI a technology that sort of small to medium enterprises can really innovate in, where students that are coming through universities can really aspire to innovate in, you can create all sorts of opportunity. And so that's one thing I'm really excited about. It doesn't mean that we don't need bigger computers and bigger investment in that space, but it's around about sort of where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. I think there's a real opportunity for Australia to lead the world in that aspect.
And how good a job are we making of seizing that opportunity? What if anything, is holding us back?
I think, so for instance, the South Australian government's doing a really good job on this. At the institute that I direct at the moment, they've been investing very strategically. They invested $12 million into the institute just this year in industrial AI. CBA, one of the largest banks in the country, has just invested a $7 million centre into our institute in foundational AI. I think the federal government's getting getting the message, and I think that there are real opportunities there, but I think you're seeing what's happening around the rest of the world, and there's really a lot of movement in this space. And one thing that I get a little bit nervous about is that we have a lot of natural talent here in the country. We have sort of world-class universities. Over decades, we've built up that talent, and it's really ours to seize, but there's sort of a narrowing window. And but I think South Australia is doing a really, really good job, so I'm really proud of that.
And using that Elon Musk sort of huge computer example, can you talk to us about how we do all of these things when we know we live on a planet with resource constraints? I mean, I'm sure everybody's mind, like mine, ran to 1 million litres of water. I mean, maybe they're doing that well and it's all recycled and all the rest of it, but we know AI is energy hungry and the energy's got to come from somewhere, and obviously we're trying to move our energy mix away from fossil fuel to renewable sources. How do the two work together? Water constraints, how do the two work together?
It's a really good question, and this is where I think the scaling hypothesis is wrong, because the whole idea that we solved AI and we just need bigger computers and bigger energy sources just doesn't scale. As you're pointing out, we can't rely on fossil fuels anymore. We're going to need to shift the entire energy grid over, and so just basically trying to get more energy and putting it into AI isn't something that's going to work. So this whole narrative around disruption, and part of the issue here is we have a fundamental misunderstanding of how AI works at the moment. And so these are symptoms of our misunderstanding. So investment in fundamental R&D is really going to help with this. There's an upside as well. The one thing I'm really excited by too is AI for science. There's a lot of really good innovation coming in here. So just last year, some professors at the Institute won a global competition on using AI to predict new battery catalysts. So batteries are going to be crucial for the energy transition. So making batteries more efficient, using AI for science in terms of getting greater efficiencies into the market. There's some real opportunities there, but we need to be thinking strategically.
And with all of this happening, can you talk to us about the workforce of the future? Clearly the statistics tell us that we could be heading to a future where whole categories of jobs are lost, other categories of jobs are enhanced, and people are more productive and consequently presumably able to command more remuneration in the marketplace because they're achieving greater results. But left to itself, that distribution may be fundamentally inequitable. How do you see that? And if a student was in the audience who's in their first year of their university career, or they're talking to their younger siblings about what the job market of the future will look like and the potential things to study, what advice would you be giving?
It's a great question. I tend to be a glass half full person, so for any young people in the audience here, I think the future is really exciting. I think AI is going to be permeating everything that you're going to be seeing, and it's going to be amplifying what you're doing. In some ways, I think AI itself is going to disappear in terms of being a term. It's just going to be embedded in everything that you do, and it's going to be a tool that you're going to be using to do greater science, get greater efficiencies. One thing I think about it a little bit is a lot of people were scared when computers came out in the 1980s. There are a lot of, like when Microsoft Excel came out, a lot of accountants calling foul, saying we're going to lose all these jobs. I believe that there are more accountants now in Australia than there ever were before. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I've got some good accountants.
That's because Microsoft Excel is so bloody confusing. That's my explanation.
But my central point there is that these innovations allowed accountants to jump up a semantic level rather than actually having to do sort of like the day-to-day accounting and debiting and crediting. They're able to jump up that semantic level. And one thing I'm optimistic with AI is that's going to allow a lot of Australian workers to jump up that semantic level. But it's really incumbent upon our government and our industries to invest now, because the jurisdictions that invest strategically in AI now, they're going to be the biggest winners in terms of the global job market. The jurisdictions that sit in their hands, they're going to be playing catch up, and we will have job losses. And so it really is sort of, we want to keep that glass half full and really lean into the opportunity.
And how do you see that for healthcare, the job shakeout?
So I think that healthcare is quite unique in that the human element within it is so fundamental to the way that, that services delivered. So in a lot of ways, I think the greatest advantage will be in that augmentation space. So it's really about trying to refocus the healthcare workforce on caring for people. So in a lot of ways, for healthcare, I'd say if you're a student and you're thinking about, what do I want to do, I'd look at training in healthcare in a particular practice or area of practice, but also combining it with an understanding of how AI works as much as possible. In fact, I think broadly as education institutions, we have a responsibility to educate all students about the fundamentals of machine learning. And I know that sounds for some students like the worst possible thing that they would have to study. We have tried to teach our psych students how to code, and sometimes that hasn't gone down too well. But generally, if we can have a deep understanding of the technology, we can also recognise how to use it to enhance what we do in our jobs. So we can empower ourselves to become better at whatever we need to do. And in healthcare, that's caring for people. So, imagine having nurses out there in primary practice who can practice outside of their area of endorsement or their scope of practice safely because they have an expert AI system alongside of them. Or remote Australia, where we have a huge healthcare shortage and, where there are people who have to travel so far just to have babies, to get routine care, routine health checks. We could keep our rural and remote population so much healthier by really embracing this type of technology. Yeah.
And in defence, across defence history, the ratio between human soldiers and machines has changed, and obviously today's sophisticated weaponry is very different from anything we've had in earlier eras of human history. But how do you see AI buttressing that?
Yeah, so I first joined the army as an infantry officer, which effectively means digging holes and walking up hills and doing all the stereotypical combat stuff that we think about. And there's a really big question there. What is the role now of that? I personally think that there'll always be a need for that sort of conventional defence stereotype. But you don't need someone that can pack march. In fact, the person that can pack march probably isn't the right person that's sitting in a basement coding. And I think defence needs to change how it is looking at hiring if you want to be ready to fight the next war. Now, that's not to glorify fighting the next war, but the point of defence is, if we want to take it from a pure defensive perspective, I think you don't need someone that can run 2.5 kilometres in 11 minutes. We need someone that we're able to hire and we are using in a part-time workforce, people that are working within the university system at an AI institute. They're able to actually be relevant and competent in what they're doing and to bring them in as we need.
And do you think defence is addressing that skills change? Because
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
So recently Defence started up Space and Cyber Command, which is similar to Army, Navy, Air Force. They are starting to change the employment categories, how you join Defence. Coming from a culturally and linguistically diverse background is something that is viewed as a real asset within a defence construct now, because it allows you to connect with the diaspora, it allows you to have a background that is relevant to defence in the 21st century.
And I want to talk now about AI and democratic processes. We've already, if we've been having this conversation back, in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, smartphones, Twitter, Facebook, I doubt few of us would have foreseen back then the way in which social media has completely re-geared how people get their information, and in many ways has completely re-geared democratic norms as a result. And a lot of the hyper-partisanship we see around the world is buttressed by the way in which social media feeds people certain forms of information and not necessarily fact-driven, and you find your way into your own tribe and you don't get out of it, so you don't hear the contending view. By the time AI is embedded in all of this, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and I think the most dangerous point is when the technology is new and just out there. That's what we found with social media. Social media kind of hit and we weren't ready for it. We weren't kind of prepared for that. And I think it's not going to be the same as social media. I think it's going to hit in different ways. Obviously, AI is a very, very apt technology for pretending or taking on likenesses of other people, sort of what we call like deep fakes. That is a source of sort of great malicious harm for democracies, people having voices that aren't theirs. Now, I think that there is definitely legislative steps that can be taken. The other thing too is just education in AI. So for instance, there are protocols now. There's a protocol called C2PA, which is a protocol that many big companies are signing on to now, which basically allows you to check the provenance of media as it's coming through. You can check an image, you can check video, you can actually check the sources where it's coming from. And so increasingly, I know I've got my kids are in high school and primary school. When they're playing with these AI systems, they're getting answers, but they're also getting asked to actually check the provenance. Where do the answers come from? Where is that being sourced from? And so that's something that we're not accustomed to. When we see an image, we take it for granted that that is it. And I think that's a generational change. We're going to have to question. And also, so I think it's a technological question. We need to basically have protocols and systems in place to ensure that people can check the provenance of where the information is coming from. I do think legislation is important. I've been lucky enough to sit on the temporary AI expert panel for the federal government, and some really interesting discussions going on inside there about what are legislations that would make sense, how do we put guardrails in place, and they're really important. And I think Australia is the sort of progressive democracy that we are. It's really incumbent upon us to sort of lead the world in that regard, because our voice, even though we think we're a small country, our voice matters, and people look to us for those types of decisions. And so I think there's a real opportunity again for us to lead in AI.
So I think that there's some real possibilities around enhancing our democratic institutions. So when we think about how democracy is supported by those institutions, a lot of it involves processes where people get a chance to have input into commenting on policies and things like that. So someone puts up an idea, people debate, people bring their ideas together. Technology can actually enhance that process. So there are, in fact, groups in the US that are looking at deliberative platforms to enhance democratic or deliberative conversations between people within democratic systems. So that's quite a technological enhancement that could help. And in addition to that, there are ways that we can detect malign influence. So foreign influence, for example, in our democratic processes can be detected by using algorithms. So some of the work that we're doing here at University of Adelaide with a couple of colleagues from the data science area looks at monitoring and guarding the public information environment. So it's called MAGPIE. Basically, MAGPIE is this idea of understanding how we teach people to reason about complex data, particularly online data that they might encounter. So can we use AI systems and machine learning to enhance that reasoning ability within people so that when they do get information handed to them, they have a set of tools that they can work through, so they're not being convinced that, you know, there's a particular conspiracy theory that they should believe, or, you know, that someone's operating something out of a pizza shop or whatever it is. You name it, there's a million conspiracy theories. But what we need to do is use the technology in a way that enhances that critical faculty of, you know, sitting there and going, okay, why is this information in front of me? What does it actually mean? Where is it coming from? And then if we can enhance that reasoning process, we've actually enhanced democracy, because we've got informed voters. We've got people out there who are casting their votes with information that they know is accurate, and so they can decide in a way that's truly what they want in their future. And that, of course, is, you know, what we should be trying to do, I think. Yeah.
And Sam, I'm going to come to you on this point, but I'd like it if you could build on what you said about accountability earlier, because it seems to me in the, you know, doing the comparison with social media, you know, one of the great vices in social media is we really haven't pinned who's accountable. So, you know, if there's, you know, if in the advertiser today there was sexist and racist content, we would know that the editor and the publisher of the advertiser were responsible for that. We'd have legal remedies if we chose to take them. If you have the same content on Facebook or X, then the argument goes Facebook, X are not publishers, they're not responsible for the content that's on their platform. And then who is responsible for it? How do you chase down the people who are putting the sexist, racist content on there? And I understand that they have content moderators and they do some things to take the very worst, child pornography and other things off. But anybody who's engaged with Twitter X would know much vile content survives any of those moderation processes. So given we haven't even pinned accountability there, how can we pin accountability in this AI world? I mean, if there was a deep fake that got real purchase, was believed by a lot of voters, pollsters were able to see that it was having an impact on how people intended to vote, what could we do about that?
Yeah, so I might disagree with my panellists here. I'm not sure that this is a new problem, right? So there's a fantastic case in Australian law from the 1910s, 1920s, and it was talking about a requirement by the federal government that all comments within newspapers have to have who it was by. And it went all the way to the High Court. People were losing their minds. How can we possibly keep up to date with all of this? How can we verify? And the High Court said, well, of course you can. If the federal government has said that you are to do it, they have the constitutional power under Section 51, go ahead. Now, companies naturally don't want to be regulated. If you put that regulation in there, they have to follow or they get punished. Now, we say that you can't have child pornography online. They, for the most part, are able to control that. I don't think there's any legal difference between saying that and a defamatory comment or something that you think might cause division within an electoral system. There is a question of enforcement, but there's no question there of our ability to legislate for it. From an enforcement perspective, if you ratchet up the punishment high enough, the companies will either leave or they will comply. Now, we had that instance where Facebook withdrew for a couple of days and there was quite a little bit of controversy around that, but I do think that if you'd left it a month, they would have come back. There is a very profitable market here. If they want to work within the Australian jurisdiction, they should have to follow Australian rules.
Okay, I'm pleased to hear that. That's heartening. Our time together is growing short, but I just want to throw a last question to each of you. If you had Anthony Albanese's job or Peter Malinauskas' job, or you had them both at the same time, what would be the one thing that you'd be doing that currently isn't being done?
Ooh, that's a good one.
On AI.
All right. All sorts of, I was going to say, I could get in a lot of trouble here. I think in AI, what I would be encouraging the Prime Minister and Premier to think more about is AI is the technology of this century. And it's not just an economic question, it's a sovereign question. And when it comes to sovereignty, we really have to look at it through a different investment lens. And I don't think that's cutting through at the moment. I think at the moment it's an economic thing. We're thinking just like TVs and computers can be made overseas and we import it. All those previous technologies don't rely on Australian data, don't rely on Australian private data, don't rely on Australian values. And it is a sovereign question, not just an economic question. And it's something that I think the federal government could do a lot better at, because we're not seeing that type of investment for this sovereign question.
Interesting. Carol?
I think I'd be getting them to focus really specifically on where the largest inequalities are in our society and saying, okay, let's invest in those areas to transform people's lives. So I think the problem with our fragile democracy is actually also a problem with inequality. So People are suffering at the moment from the cost of living a lot. That manifests itself in a whole lot of different problems in healthcare, all across society. If we have this great technology, why aren't we focusing it not on generating images of cats, but on actually...
Ones that definitely haven't been eaten.
Yeah. Or, why aren't we actually doing it like the best that we can with it? Why aren't we really focusing on trying to make people's lives actually better? And I know that sounds like really kind of idealistic, because it's actually hard to do that. That's what all governments are trying to do, I would hope. But it means so much for the future of Australia as being a leader in this area. If we can solve these really difficult questions around inequality, I think we can really show the world that this technology can be for everyone. Yeah.
It's a really interesting vision, and Australia is good at the platforms and systems. We've historically been good public policy innovators. Yes, Sam.
I think I would be trying to see if we can take a position on, are we going to respond to emerging technology in a piecemeal way, updating the Privacy Act, updating the Defence Act, updating this, updating that, or are we going to take perhaps a principles or risk-based approach and say this is the AI Act, and everything that comes forward, domestic and international, state or federal, has to comply. I think the federal government has a job in steering the ship, and the states will comply, but also I think we have a role internationally. If we talk about inequalities, there are so many models out there that we could follow in terms of data sharing within the region, keeping in mind sovereign data, but also collective data that can help everyone in the region, and being able to actually create a sort of a data mine or a data bank that our neighbours, if we want to do a Pacific step up, that our neighbours are able to use to help everyone.
And just quickly looking, for politicians, for the civil public service to do an AI Act, do we have the skill base we need for that?
I think we do, yeah. So, big picture, we've got the constitutional authority, and that helps in federalism. But then from a domestic perspective, we are a highly educated country that is leading the way. We can do it.
Terrific. Well, we've heard some good news from the panel, which is something we definitely wanted to do, bring to you the risks but also the opportunities. So I would be grateful if you would join me in thanking the panel for a magnificent conversation. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, Professor Gillard, Professor Lucy, Professor Semler and Dr. White for that insightful discussion. Just to recap, there is no need to go out and dig up your backyard for an AI bunker today, and it seems somewhat unlikely that we're going to have a Terminator-style apocalypse, so sorry about that, Arnie. Also, AI is more than about generating cute pictures of kittens and puppies. What we have learnt is that by leaning into the opportunities that AI presents, we can change our workplaces for the better, improve outcomes for our healthcare, and also support thriving democratic communities. But we will need protocols, systems, legislation, and education in place, and we're going to need to ask more questions. Someone who is actively asking questions is one of the university's own PhD candidates in this field, Sophia McLeod, who is going to give our vote of thanks today. Sophia is a third-year PhD candidate at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning. Her research is focused on research and application of computer vision for spacecraft guidance and navigation. Her research earned her an EOS Space Systems Research Award through the Andy Thomas Space Foundation in 2022. She's also spent time in Japan researching ways to accurately estimate the positions of spacecraft in our lunar orbit. Could you please join me in welcoming Sophia?
Thank you, Professor Gallagher. It's an honour to have been asked here today to give the vote of thanks for the University of Adelaide. As an alum and current PhD student at the university, it is incredible to be given the opportunity to meet and speak with the Honourable Professor Julia Gillard AC as fellow alum and a highly distinguished leader on both the Australian and world stages. I'm also particularly pleased to be here today to listen to our panellists, Professor Simon Lucy, Professor Carolyn Semler, and Dr. Samuel White, reflect on the topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning across the health, education, defence, and politics sectors. For the students in this room, these opportunities to hear from long-term experts in and related to our respected fields provide us with a broader perspective on the gravity of our work and its impact on the world, which we wouldn't otherwise get with our noses buried deep in research papers. I feel very privileged to be working in the field of artificial intelligence for space, whilst having both the Australian Institute for Machine Learning and the Australian Space Agency at my doorstep. This field simply wouldn't prosper with the introduction of AI, and I'm honoured to play a role in enabling future space missions that would have historically seemed far-fetched to now be realised. On behalf of the University of Adelaide, I would like to thank you all for delivering an insightful and inspiring discussion today. It has certainly been highlighted to me the roles that we play in this bigger picture and the impact we have on Australia's place in AI. It is my pleasure to present Professor Gillard with a small gift as a token of our appreciation for facilitating today's public lecture. I would also like to present small gifts to our panellists for sharing their expertise and contributing to the insightful discussion today. To all of you who have attended here today, I hope you enjoyed the discussions as much as I did. Thank you.
Professor Gillard, we are honoured to have you as a visiting honorary professor at the University of Adelaide, and thank you once again for facilitating this public lecture on artificial intelligence. That concludes the formalities for this morning. On behalf of the University of Adelaide, thank you to all of you for joining us. We are delighted that you've been able to participate in this year's Julia Gillard Public Lecture and hope to see you again next year. Thank you and enjoy the day ahead.